We are back, episode 20 of the Feel for the Game podcast. And we're going to start with our new segment we've been doing for the College Football Playoff Top 25 reveal. We have just had the first five teams get announced. Landon, you can press play whenever you're ready. We've had it paused because we've been trying to get prepped. Got
Had
here
some
just in time for the
computer
start.
had some computer issues as well. My laptop was just freaking out. But we have James Madison entering at 25 this week. North Texas coming in at number 24. Iowa back in here at number 23. Georgia Tech still in here at 22, and Houston entering going to 21.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing all these teams jump in after being unranked. Like Houston was unranked and jumped to 21, which is similar to what I've got. I had to move up to 22 from being unranked. A lot of different teams fell out of the poll this week, so got some interesting teams to look at. I think Iowa's a really odd one for them to put in here. I think they're trying to bolster some resumes, putting them back in for sure.
It's a possibility. They've definitely done that before.
I think they could be pushing Oregon up. That's my theory. Because Oregon, they need a team to go ahead of Ole Miss. They want to move Ole Miss down.
If
I
you
think
do
they've already
look at
got them
those
ahead of Ole
final
Miss.
teams, like for these spots though, 21 through 25, it's really like thin pickings though. Like,
Yeah, I mean that margin between even the 20th team and maybe the 30th isn't too deep. You got Tulane moving up 4 spots to 20
wow.
after they shut out Charlotte 27-0. Michigan drops 4 spots. Arizona up to 18,
Wow.
which I've got them at 17. I think that's actually a really good move, acknowledging Arizona as being a solid team. Virginia at 17. I've got Virginia at 19, so not too far off. USC at 16. Got them at 15 in my poll.
Same here.
So I'm not too far off on some of these teams. I have Michigan at 21. I think they were probably a little overinflated just considering the fact that their only big games this season, they lost all of them. So even though we picked them to win, I really didn't have much of a basis for having that game picked other than the win streak that they had. Utah drops down to 15, 2 spots. So that definitely allows some teams to move up. Vanderbilt stays at
Oh,
14. I don't like that at all.
that's terrible.
Yeah, that virtually eliminates their chances of making it from the playoffs now.
Yeah, they're
They don't
finished.
have a chance. Unless complete chaos happens, Vanderbilt doesn't have a chance.
Where is Texas going to be? Is my big question here. They're going to be at 13, right in front of Vanderbilt.
And see, they could move them over Miami and snub out the
Oh,
Miami talk right here, which I think is a real possibility because Texas has so many more good wins.
they
And Miami
do.
has a bad loss too. So if you want to talk about bad losses, Texas and Miami
Yeah,
can
but
fight for
Bama's
that.
got a really bad loss, dude. Texas is 13. Okay.
So they move up 3 spots to number 13 with the win over A&M. I think that's fair. I've got Texas at 14, but I think that Vanderbilt deserves to be ahead of them. I know they lost the head-to-head in Austin, but I think if Vanderbilt played Texas right now on neutral site or in Nashville, I think Vanderbilt absolutely could win that football game. So
I'd have to agree.
I don't think the head-to-head matters as much to me there, considering Texas loss to Florida being not a great loss, and the inconsistency they've had. The games against Kentucky, um, I mean, the game even against UTEP was super sloppy, and they got Miami at 12.
No
That
movement there.
that figures. I think they really want BYU to go ahead and get blown out in the Big 12 championship so they can have a chance to sneak Miami in. All right, let's see what their case is for Miami here. So I think in order for Miami to actually have a chance, they would need more than just BYU dropping out when they would need an Alabama blowout in
They would
the
need
SEC
some
championship game.
crazy stuff because the cutoff line's going to be 10
Yeah, that's
with
what it's
the
looking like.
ACC champ and then the group of five.
I think that Miami would need Alabama to get throttled in the SEC championship game by Georgia and get knocked out of the playoffs. I don't see happening, or maybe a player gets injured on a team. Um, that would probably be the only way it helps them out. BYU at 11. So BYU is currently sitting in the cut line right now. That's really
They're the first
interesting.
team out at the moment. Yeah.
They got to win their conference championship to get in. So that's really interesting to look at. I mean, that's where I've got them. I've got them at 11 as well. I was surprised that the committee moved them down. I figured they would have possibly even Notre Dame at the cut line because if they're not going to put Miami in, I wouldn't be surprised if they took Notre Dame out. And if BYU wins, they'll have to take Notre Dame out because they're going to keep Texas Tech in. Notre Dame
Oh,
drops to 10, so that's I think it's shaping up for that scenario.
yeah. So BYU wins. That boots them out. Boots Notre Dame out.
Would be chaos, and I don't think that's going to happen. I don't have any faith that BYU can compete with Texas Tech after seeing the offensive output they had last time they played this season, which was not that long ago. So if you want to think if they played in week one, and Bear Botmeyer was playing his first game, they just kind of laid an egg and then played 11 games and won all of them after that, I would have a completely different feel for that team. But just looking at it right now, I don't think that BYU really has a chance as a result of the line in that game. Bama moves up one spot to number 9. I've got Bama at 9 as well. So I've got currently 11 through 9. I have the same. I would agree on that. I think that's a good place for Bama. The Iron Bowl ended up being really interesting.
Yeah, of course, Auburn just found some stupid way to lose it at the end.
Yeah, I'm excited
No
to talk about that
surprise
game in a
there.
little bit. There's some really interesting stat breakdowns that we're gonna have to talk about because that game just makes no sense to me.
And I saw 17 to nothing like early second quarter. I was like, oh, this is over. Like, I can't believe I picked this.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that game profiles a lot like the games that Alabama's been playing in losses. So like the game against Oklahoma, it's actually the opposite. If I want to say this right, Alabama had a huge statistical advantage over Oklahoma in their win if you take out the turnovers. Auburn did that to Alabama, and Bama still won. So it's really interesting. You got Oklahoma staying at 8. I've also got Oklahoma at 8, and Texas A&M dropping 4 spots to number 7. Okay, now this is going to be interesting. They did not move Ole Miss down. They actually moved Ole Miss up. I'm very surprised. There is Ole Miss at number 6. So
No penalty for y'all there.
no penalty for losing Lane Kiffin, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That's very surprising to me. I mean, I thought that the Egg Bowl performance was solid. I don't think that it was impressive enough to take Ole Miss and move them up just for the win. But A&M losing to Texas like we predicted, that definitely was enough for me to move Ole Miss over A&M. If you look at the strength of schedule of both of those teams, not very great. But I think Ole Miss's wins over Oklahoma in Norman, dominating Tulane, who's also a ranked team, dominating at home against LSU, which I know it seemed close. I feel like Ole Miss dominated that football game. There's a lot of wins on that schedule that I feel like benefit Ole Miss as opposed to A&M. Oregon moves up into the coveted 5 seed. Texas Tech moves up to 4. And so the only teams I have different there, I have Ole Miss at 5 and Oregon at 6. I just think that Ole Miss's qualities of opponent are better, and the loss at Indiana I don't think was the best. Even though Indiana's a great football team, I didn't like Oregon's performance in that game. You got Georgia at 3, Indiana 2, and Ohio State 1. So right now, as it's seeded, the matchups are Alabama at Oklahoma. That's a good rematch game. I know Bama wants all the smoke in that one. I'd love to see that. You got A&M rematching Notre Dame,
Mm.
and that would be in College Station this time. So that would be interesting. So it's 2 rematch games where the team that I guess A&M won and they've got at home. Oklahoma won and they've got at home. So that'll be really interesting. You've got the team that lost going on the road to the team that beat them. So that's really interesting. I think you've got Ole Miss hosting what would be the
ACC
ACC
champion
champion.
if chalk happens, yeah.
And we were talking about this just a minute ago. We're not really expecting chalk to fly in the ACC for the most part. It hasn't up to this point. Duke did get throttled by Virginia already this season, so we do have that in our back pocket to look at. But I'm not expecting this game to be a blowout again. I think it might be possibly closer than people think because the line is definitely
It's
suggesting.
only at 3
Yeah,
points.
that's
Yeah.
that's crazy. When you told me that, I was expecting it to be at least a touchdown, just given this season's results already on the field. Vegas seems to think that there's something else going on here that people are not paying attention to. So I think we'll have to be watching out for that. We'll get to those conference championship predictions here in a little bit, but Oregon would be taking on most likely the Group of 5 representative from the 12 seed. I think that's going to be either North Texas or Tulane, most likely, but I'd probably
Or James
favor.
Madison if the ACC team is Duke that wins.
Yeah, and they did put Tulane over James Madison. So let's say Virginia wins. You've got Virginia probably going in and playing at Ole Miss, and then Tulane or North Texas win. I think they're probably getting in over James Madison because Tulane's higher and North Texas is higher.
Yeah.
So James
Yeah.
Madison would have to have Virginia lose to Duke to get into the playoff.
And North Texas and Tulane's resumes are going to be strengthened by whoever wins that game. James Madison beating Troy is going to do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Troy's not terrible, but they're really
And
not
James
great.
Madison's favored by like 24 for a reason.
Are they actually?
Yeah.
I didn't even see that. And I thought Goose Crowder in Troy played really well against Southern Miss the other day. I picked Southern Miss in that game, and they ended up kind of laying an egg there. But I mean, they're not terrible. It's just you can't really get that much out of those wins quality wise with the committee. They don't really care about those Sun Belt Conference Championship games
Yeah,
if
and
they're not
speaking
playing
of
a ranked
Southern
team.
Miss, I can't believe their fall off. They were 7-2 and then lose three in a row.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
Braylon
injuries
Braxton
hurt
just
them.
being injured, just coming off that wasn't the same or something. I didn't watch them a whole lot, but
Yeah, I could tell that the run game was kind of slowing down for them. The passing game was catching on late in garbage time in some of their games recently, like South Alabama and Troy, but they were getting handled pretty easily both of those teams. So regardless, that doesn't really impact the playoff field very much. I think that JMU probably runs away with their game, and they're just going to need Duke to win. I would love to see the ACC get left out. I mean, the ACC chaos has been unbelievable this year. I don't think any of their teams deserve to get in. Even Virginia with a win, I would really hate to see to go to Oxford because I don't think that their football team has played quality opponents and probably deserves to be in the field.
well, Virginia really just benefited from one of the easiest schedules in the ACC. If you look at who they've played and stuff like that, that's really the only reason they're 10-2.
No, the only reason they have a chance to be in the playoffs right now is because for some reason the ACC decided that the NC State game was not a conference game this year.
That
They're
was
in the
that
same
was a weird
conference. They've always been in
scheduling
the
thing they
same
did.
conference, but because of some scheduling thing, they decided that it wasn't, so it didn't count. I hate this. Um, if you look at the at-large teams, honestly, Miami would already probably be in the conference championship at this point. So I don't know what the tiebreaker is, who's next up, but I feel like it'd probably be Miami, and easily they're going to be that 11 seed going to Oxford for a way better football game.
I'm just disappointed in SMU that they blew that game.
Well, you mentioned that to me. I don't know if we picked that game, but you were talking about it, and it just smelled like one of those games where,
Smelled funny,
yeah,
for sure.
the team that needed to win to just be in the playoff conversation was going to drop the ball. Cal has been playing some better football down the stretch. They played spoiler already, beating Louisville earlier this season. They almost beat Virginia, right? I thought that game was pretty close, wasn't it?
I think it was.
That game was
Yeah,
interesting. I know they lost to Virginia Tech,
they lost to
so I might
Stanford
be getting
also.
confused. So Cal's
They
been
got
super
they
up and
got
down.
blown out by Stanford like 21.
Yeah, it's crazy. They have one of my favorite players, De Jesus. He's an absolute stud. He's like 5'7" and like 170 pounds, but he's got like over 90 receptions this season. Absolute stud. I think he had like 10 touchdowns. And Sagapalute's been playing great. He's definitely going to be solid. I know that they hired a new coach. Forgot who they were able to grab. Was it Oregon's defensive coordinator? I think they might have grabbed him
I
today, or
didn't see. I
there
saw
was reports coming out that they were trying to hire him.
who hired Oregon's offensive coordinator.
Kentucky got Will
Kentucky.
Stein.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a good hire. I think they need somebody with some legitimate offensive prowess. So it's a good look for Kentucky, finally getting somebody who knows how to call plays on offense other than toss dive. So good stuff there.
Yeah, this is saying Cal is set to hire Oregon's D coordinator.
Yeah, I think that'll probably go through. I think hopefully they'll hold on to Brian Harson. I think he's going to be a key in that offense as they try to develop Jaron Sagapalute. He's really solid. They've got a lot of core players that are pretty talented. After losing Fernando Mendoza, I'm surprised they were able to pull off a half decent season. So good for the Golden Bears. Yeah, I think that kind of concludes my thoughts on the playoff this week. I really didn't have any big takeaways, maybe other than A&M falling to where I figured they probably would fall. I had them falling to 7.
Yeah.
I guess the other takeaway would be that they didn't drop Ole Miss. So right there in the middle, and then as a result of A&M losing, you have BYU getting pushed down. So that's really interesting to look at. BYU has been in the playoff projection up to this point, right?
Who'd you say has been in the playoff projections?
BYU.
No, they've been out for a while.
So they haven't been in.
They've been stuck at 11 for a minute.
Okay, so they've never been in. I don't know why I was under the impression that they've been in up to this point. So really, all that was dramatically impacted was A&M's loss to Texas, and then Ole Miss not getting penalized for losing their coach. So those are the two biggest takeaways for me right now. I like the matchups and the way they're shaking out. As much as I would love to see the rematch of Texas A&M and Notre Dame, I think the world needs to see Miami and Notre Dame play another football game. So I doubt we'll get that. It's looking like Miami is going to be the second team out.
And Miami pretty much has no chance at this point.
Yeah, we've virtually eliminated every team but BYU from the playoffs. And unless BYU gets absolutely smoked and Bama gets absolutely smoked, I think that the next team up would have to be Miami. So that's the only
It's,
scenario I see for Miami getting in is Alabama getting smoked by Georgia, and then which would hand them their third loss, which kind of nullifies their win in Georgia if they get absolutely killed. I
I
don't
don't
think
think they
they
would
get.
drop out of SEC team though in the championship game.
Let's say
There's just
Georgia
no way
goes
they
and
do
beats
that.
Alabama 42-17. I mean, with how Alabama's playing right now, I'm not going to rule it out. Georgia didn't play great on rivalry weekend either. I think that that's probably not going to happen, but just for sake of this conversation, let's say that that happens, and then you have BYU get mercy ruled by Texas Tech.
What if they lose close to Texas Tech
They'll stay in.
with Bama getting blown out?
And if it's a
What
really
do
close game,
what
BYU probably won't move down.
you think they would jump Bama if Bama got blown out and then they lost and then BYU lost close?
I don't think that you put them in because they lost and because Bama lost. It doesn't matter how they
So
lose.
you think BYU? You think they have to win to make it?
I think BYU's pretty much got to win to be in. That's the only scenario I see for them actually, if I think about it that way. I don't know that this is tough. It depends on how the committee views the team and the losses in conference championships. Because if it was me, I have my own criteria for how I look at that. I don't know the committee's criteria is for a team losing in their conference championship. I don't know if it has to do with the conference, the way they lose. I don't know because a lot of these teams have already played. Alabama and Georgia already played. Alabama won. Texas Tech and BYU already played. Texas Tech won. So we've already seen those games. So I don't know after they're being played again what the committee's going to think if a different result happens or if the same result happens or a worse result. It's honestly up to interpretation. So I can come up with as many theories as I want, but I don't think it's really going to change very much. It'll be really interesting to watch, though. I think the only scenario for me, if I was going to put BYU in, is I think they either have to lose really close or win because they got dominated the first time. If they get dominated again, or it's not really that close, what makes me think they'll be competitive in the playoff field when there's other teams on the fringe that could be more competitive? So if somebody has to move in and BYU doesn't at least show an improved performance, I think Miami takes the jump because they don't play.
Do you
So
think Texas Tech stays in the field with a loss?
I think that if they lose, you still got to go back and look at how they beat BYU the first time because that game happened and they dominated. If for some reason they were to get dominated, you have to look at it a little bit differently. You kind of split ends. So I think that it doesn't really matter what happens to Texas Tech. I think they're going to be in. It just affects their seeding dramatically.
Yeah.
If BYU beats them, BYU is probably the 5 or 6 seed, which is a huge jump. Maybe not, but they'll be higher for sure. Texas Tech probably will be somewhere in the realm of the 7th or 8th seed. So conference championship week really could change a lot of these matchups, but I think that chalk's not always going to fly, but a lot of these are pretty obvious. Like the Duke Virginia games, probably one of the obvious ones that just shows us what the result was already this season. And then Texas Tech and BYU already played in another game where the other team got smoked. I don't think those games will be total blowouts again, but I think that both of those teams would probably win. So interesting stuff. We'll probably be having a completely different conversation about seeding next week after they announce it because that's the final ranking, just how they chose to seed it. But I really do feel like that these are the teams that most likely are just going to be in. It's just how they're seeded. BYU has a chance to make it in. It's not high.
Yeah, I mean it's just you got to win. It's a win and in for them.
Yeah, well, you control your own destiny. So a lot of teams would kill to be in that position. Miami's not. They're just sitting there. They're like South Carolina, Ole Miss were
Yeah.
last year. That's the worst position to be in. So I know that teams like Ole Miss, they're in the playoffs. They're just thankful that they're not on the fringe right now. I think that's going to do it for our college football playoff segment. Okay, it's time for a Week 14 recap. We're going to go ahead and get into the Iron Bowl matchup. Auburn takes on Alabama in Jordan Hare for the Kurtz game. We thought that this game was going to be interesting, and it turned out in the fourth quarter to be a really interesting game, but it still took almost 4 quarters for it to start getting interesting.
I was just so surprised that Auburn was able to get back into it after going down 17-0 with their offensive struggles and stuff, but they found a way to do that. But then, of course, just another bonehead screw up at the end of the game for Auburn to lose another close one.
Yeah, unfortunately for Auburn, they just couldn't string together enough miracles in this one to come right within a final shot of tying the game. They had that fumble on the last drive, which really sucked for Auburn. But I figured this was going to be close. You called the outright upset, and it absolutely could have happened. Alabama didn't have their best stuff in this game. I don't feel like. I mean, they ran the ball okay, but passing the ball, they didn't. They didn't really move it too well against Auburn. I've been saying that if Auburn could string together a good offensive performance with a good defensive performance, that Bama would be in a lot of trouble. I don't think there's many teams that would do well against Auburn if they have their best outing on offense and defense because their ceiling's high on both ends. They just hadn't put it together yet. And this game was close. They didn't really put it together for 4 quarters, but in the fourth quarter, the offense really turned up. I felt like Ashton Daniels played some of his best ball in that fourth quarter. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. Isaiah Horton came up with 3 red zone touchdowns in this game for Alabama, which ended up making him probably the impact player of this game. Without Isaiah Horton, they don't have any of their touchdowns. So I think that you've got to look back at that last catch, the 6 yard game winning touchdown to seal it for Alabama late, right before they get the fumble, which I guess you could say that sealed the game. But Isaiah Horton was the impact player in this game easily. Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, little to no impact in this game, which was shocking. They've made an impact in every game so far for them.
Yeah, to talk more about Bama, I mean, these offensive struggles have really gone back since the LSU game. They just look kind of off, in my opinion. And my big question is, how's that going to, or how are they going to look against Georgia in the SEC championship now? I mean, they've historically been really good against Georgia, but is their offense going to be able to come back strong enough for them to win that game?
They got to be able to run the ball. That's what it comes down to. And I think that they've tried some new things. They're moving some guys around. They had a better performance against Auburn running the ball. I think they had a guy get around that 90-yard mark. Still no 100-yard rushers, really. I think their only 100-yard rusher this season was against Vanderbilt, possibly, with Jan Miller breaking off a garbage time touchdown. I've never seen an Alabama team struggle this much to run the ball. I don't know what the problem is because I feel like the offensive line talent's there and they've got some pedigree at the running back position. I don't know why they're struggling to run the ball. I don't know if it's a schematical thing because Caleb DeBoer offenses have been able to run the ball. I mean, if you go back to their playoff run, they had that state running back transfer. What was his name? You would know.
Dylan Johnson.
Noah Johnson played really, really well for them. I mean, even the quarterback run was an element for them, but up to this point, I mean, the only big runs I'm seeing is from Ty Simpson, which is crazy to even say. Every now and then he scrambles and gets a decent chunk of yards, but he shouldn't be running the ball in the first place. Like he's a pocket passer. So I think that's really strange. We need to see them run the ball if they're going to want to have a really good chance to beat Georgia in this rematch. But Ashton Daniels really was the story of the game for Auburn. I mean, he ended up accounting for a large majority of the yards in this game. They outgained Alabama, and that was not really even my key
This is
stat.
410 to 280.
Yeah, I mean that's the second time Alabama's done something like this season. This one stands out the most to me. What's funny is they had the same situation happen to them against Oklahoma where they lost, but they absolutely outplayed Oklahoma pretty much in every area of the field except for the turnover margin, and that's what happened here. Auburn had 2 turnovers in this game. Bama had none. Auburn actually went 2 for 2 in the red zone, but Bama doubled them up in red zone possessions, going 4 for 4. That kind of sums up to me this game coming down to a one possession. Auburn having all those other statistical categories in their favor. Um, Honestly, if you just showed me those things, I would have said they won. But then you take turnovers and red zone trips into account, and Auburn's just a little lacking there. So I think that's what it came down to. This was a good matchup. I think Auburn is much improved late this season. With the hire of Alex Golish, maybe that offense takes a turn next year. Ashton Daniels is looking to return. Deuce Knight up in the air on if he's coming back, but I would think he probably returns as well. So they've got some bright future if they can hold on to their star players on offense. I really like what Alex Golish is able to do with quarterbacks. You see what he's done with Byron Brown these past 2 seasons. Byron Brown put up one of the best statistical seasons a group of 5 quarterback has put up probably ever this year. Over 1,000 yards rushing, 14 rushing touchdowns, over 3,000 passing yards, I think around 28 touchdown passes. So they got a guy like Deuce Knight and Ashton Daniels just waiting in the bullpen for Alex Golish next season. I think that at least one of those guys will be putting up some really good stats for that team next year. They're going to be dangerous. Moving on to the Egg Bowl, we went to this game. It was a lot of fun, at least for me. Ole Miss wins with a final of 38-19 in Starkville to improve to 11-1. Trinidad Chambliss finished out the season with a really strong performance, going for 385 and four total touchdowns. But he wasn't the only quarterback that had a statistical masterclass. We saw Kamario Taylor start this game, which is not what I expected, and he ran all over Ole Miss in this one.
Yeah, I mean, he had some great plays. He was really the only reason that this game was remotely close. I feel like if Shapen's back there, I don't even know if we get the 10 points with the
Yeah,
way it was looking. I mean, the runs Kamario had were just so huge for us moving the ball and scoring, and having Shapen in there, you wouldn't have had any of that.
Yeah, I think that it would flip how y'all play. I mean, y'all are a different team when Kamario Taylor's in there. Y'all can run the ball. It opens up for some play action because, I mean, you have to keep the defense so honest. Like, Kamario Taylor is a very talented runner. Like, he's super athletic. If you're not committing several guys to the box and a spy, he could get a first down on any play running the ball, which you can't say that about many guys. So I think Ole Miss had to commit a certain amount of guys to stopping the run early, and then when it was obvious that State needed to get big passing plays, they backed off and let him have yards. That was just part of the schematics of it. So I think the stats may have been a little inflated, but I mean he earned a solid 120 of those early in the game. And I mean, I don't think Ole Miss was prepared to stop that. We saw what happened with Taylor Green earlier this season. They couldn't contain him. I mean, it was pretty similar, but Kamario Taylor did what he wanted to do on the ground this game. He had an insane touchdown run. And on that one where he like completely sauced that guy in the open field.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. So State's got a bright future. Now, I think that this game obviously is not the result that State fans wanted to see, but at the end of the day, you got to be feeling pretty good about next season if you're a State fan. Braylon Womack just flipped from Auburn to Mississippi State over the week. That's a huge commitment. That's the first five-star State's pulled in a long time.
First one since Charles Cross in 19.
Yeah, that's a big deal for Jeff Levy and that coaching staff. We've been talking about that recently. I don't know if we ever mentioned it on the podcast, but I mean, I think you were feeling like that was the State lean for a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, that was his second visit last week. There's definitely been some interest.
Yeah, and I mean, I hadn't been to Starkville ever until this season, and I think I ended up going to three state games. I'm an Ole Miss fan. I can say confidently that Starkville has become a more intriguing destination for recruits. The game day atmosphere is electric when states showing up to play, and I think that this team was competitive most of the year. So you got that atmosphere almost every home game, at least for the first quarter, unless you were playing Georgia. So I think that this team is trending up. Next season could be a lot more fun for Mississippi State. So, a lot to look forward to there. I think that the key play in this game for me was the interception that hit the State player in the helmet. Princely Imam ends up getting a really, I say Princely, rest in peace. Prince Well Imam was the player that came up with this interception. It was completely insane. I think we both just kind of looked at each other after that interception and realized, yep, that's going to come back to bite Mississippi State. I mean, that was just a play like you couldn't have drawn it up worse. Like, it really should have just been an incomplete pass at the end of the day. It's a check down, just a little too high, hits an unsuspecting running back in the helmet, pops up in the air, and a defensive end comes up with a crazy snag to pull it down. Um, those plays rarely ever happen, and when they don't go your way, it's just like we worked so hard to move the ball down the field for that to happen. It's very deflating. I think that kind of just put the nail in the coffin early. It's like, okay, State's gonna have to do a lot to win this game.
Kind of just encapsulates the season too.
Yeah, you could take that as a
Random
play for
little,
the season.
random little dumb mistakes that just bite you like that.
Yeah, like the Missouri game, there were some plays that just you really couldn't even come up with an excuse
There was
for how
multiple
that happened.
plays in that game that were just completely head scratching.
Yeah, and I think that'll change. This team had some stuff not go their way this year. They had some close games. I think next year y'all could turn the tide on some of that stuff. So I mean, that play definitely sunk y'all's chances. Ole Miss getting 29 first downs and going for over 545 total yards didn't really help very
And
much.
picking on our one specific DB the whole game. Like, I don't know how many yards that dude gave up. It was bad.
Yeah, our entire wide receiver core decided to have a day in this game. Deuce Alexander had an 88-yard touchdown to kind of put this one way out of reach. Um, Deshaun Stribling had two really nice one-on-one touchdowns in the end zone. Um, he played really well. Um, Caden Lee had a really nice game. Winston Watkins had a couple catches. Um, I mean, we had a bunch of guys play some really good football in this game at wide receiver. So I think that's the biggest strength of this football team is the depth at the wide receiver position. In the playoffs, this is going to matter a ton. So when you start playing teams like, let's say Ole Miss does play in Ohio State, or they play in Indiana or Georgia again, they're going to face some really good defensive backs and some really good defensive lines. You have to be able to pick on DBs. You got to find a matchup that you like, and Ole Miss can expose just about any kind of matchup they want. They just move a guy around somewhere, sub somebody out when they're not expecting, really quick with some tempo, and you've got a different matchup that you weren't expecting to have on DB that may be giving up a lot of yards or having a lot of PIs. So I think that favors Ole Miss in a lot of games. That's the huge strength that Ole Miss has. And then Kawan Lacey has been playing some great football. He had another good game against State here. At the end of the day, this year Ole Miss had the better football team, and that's what mattered. Next year, I think we're going to be in for a really interesting egg ball. So hopefully we'll stay consistent with this podcast, and we'll be back here this time next year talking about a completely different game. I think that State's currently shaping up to have a slightly better trajectory than Ole Miss going into next year.
Maybe
So
so.
a
I
lot
will
can
say.
change in a year with now where college football is. We may be looking at a completely different scene next year. Texas is proving us right, taking down Texas A&M 27 to 17. We were on this one again. So this is another good upset to look back on as we kind of preview the 2025 season and games that we may have gotten a little bit of head start on as opposed to the media and the general public. I think we felt like Texas was probably going to take this one outright, and they were able to do that. I didn't see them winning the way that they did. I figured that Marcel Reed was probably going to have a pretty tough game for them to lose this. He didn't play well. Thought he was going to exit the game with an ankle injury early. Comes back in, doesn't throw any touchdowns, throws two picks. Not his best outing. Probably one of his worst outings of the season. It maybe other than Auburn. That one was tough. Trey Wisner goes for 174 total yards, and Texas as a team rushes for 218. I haven't seen Texas run the ball like this all season against a conference team. So this, I mean, if Texas were to make the playoffs, this would give me a different feel for the team. Unfortunately, I think this team's pretty much out of the mix for the playoff with the new rankings that we just looked at. But when they can run the ball, they're a different football team.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with how they ran the ball. I mean, that's been something that they haven't been able to do all year. But it also raises questions about A&M's run defense, which has been suspect in multiple games this year.
Yeah, we've talked about this several times. I noticed it first early in the season against UTSA and Utah State. This team was giving up big yards on the ground. But as they got into conference play, they started to win, and I think that kind of got swept under the rug. But you look at the game against Arkansas, Mike Washington and Taylor Green had career games. They played really well. A&M gave up some decent rushing yards to Missouri. Even though they won that game in a blowout, they still gave up yards on the ground. There's been a lot of constant trends with this football team giving up yards on the ground. South Carolina, I don't think they really moved it much on the ground. They actually threw it all over A&M early in the first half of that game. But they had several games this season where rushing defense was definitely not a strength. I think that if a rematch were to happen with them playing against Notre Dame again, that's the biggest matchup I'm looking for is how well Notre Dame is going to be able to run the ball against A&M in a rematch. They've got Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love playing some of the best football in the country with that dual running back system. That's hard to stop. A&M hasn't really stopped many people this season running the ball. It's just only come back to bite them in the Texas game.
Yeah, more about if that game were to happen. How would that look with the improvement Notre Dame's defense has had throughout the year? Because at that point in the season, their defense was playing very poorly, but they've improved a lot. So
The secondary's tightened up for this team. I think it matters a lot. I think this line would be very close, even though it would be in College Station theoretically with how the playoff selection committee has it. I think that Notre Dame might be close to being a favorite in that one. I might lean Notre Dame in that. In a big game when it matters the most, I don't know that I'm taking A&M. Notre Dame's been there before. They were
Notre
there
Dame was
last
there,
year.
yeah, last
They
year.
were at the national championship last year. It's hard to even believe that team made it that far. But I just don't like A&M in the spot that they're in right now. They're not peaking at all. I mean, if anything, they peaked early in the season. They're starting to fall down at the wrong time. So They may not have gone 8-4 again this year, but they're starting to kind of show the similarities of recent A&M teams where when it really matters, they kind of start to crumble. So that weak SEC conference slate that they had is starting to show a little bit, which is crazy to even say as far as them being an SEC team. I don't feel like they had a really tough schedule. But I mean, the 35-yard touchdown run from Arch Manning to ice this game was, I think, probably the play that stood out to me the most. Arch didn't play a crazy good game here. He actually started off really slow. I didn't think he made many throws early in this game, but when it really mattered, he came up with some big plays and he put his head down and he was able to find a big run here with a team that put together a pretty solid rushing output for this one. That's what won it for this team. At the end of the day, running the ball won the game for Texas. If they hadn't been able to run the ball, I think A&M would have found a way to win this. But they were able to exploit a weakness on this A&M team and brought it home. 10-point win in Austin. At least gave them a chance to be recognized for the playoff. Finished the season on a good note. I had Texas going 9-3, so definitely a good hit for me. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit with some of our hits and misses from the preseason. Now that we've finished the regular season, but that was one of mine. I don't know exactly which games I had picked for that one. It'll be interesting to look back on. But big win for Texas. A&M's gonna have to tighten up for the playoffs.
A&M remains little brother to Texas still.
Yeah, Texas owns them, like we said. So we'll see if that holds true for next year. The big game, Michigan in the Big House takes on Ohio State. Loses this one 27-9. Unfortunately, I was coerced by none other than Landon to pick the Wolverines in this one. I I had good reason, and the reason solely was the 4 game win streak. Rest in peace. Michigan had really nothing else in my mind to lure me into picking this game other than they just had been doing it up to this point. Running back injury questions. Justice Haynes was out. Gordon Marshall ends up leaving the game in the first quarter after their only big play of the game, coming off of a decent run from him. Michigan started off the game with an interception in the big run. I was like, okay, this looks good. It's happening again. And then after that, nothing. Crickets for the rest of the game.
Them being held to a field goal after that was huge for Ohio State.
6-0 was not going to get it done early in this game. Halfway through the first quarter, if they had kept going at the same pace they were going at, it still would have been a really close football game. But they went off a cliff production wise after those first 2 drives. They did not do anything. Bryce Underwood was a non factor, did nothing in the passing game, was not a contributor in the run game. I think Michigan came out with a grand total of 163 yards in this game. They had it exactly where they wanted it. A snow game in Ann Arbor, and you start off with an interception and you score on your first 2 drives. I don't know if you can draw it up better than that for Michigan. It was shaping up to be a slugfest, and then Julian Sayin just said, "Oh wait, I'm the most accurate quarterback in college football, and I have the best receivers in the sport. I'm going to throw for 3 touchdowns and 233 yards, and we're going to win the football game outright." And they just never looked back. The 35-yard touchdown on that wheel route to Jeremiah Smith was an absolute seed. They tried to call this one back for what possibly could have been a touchback. I think that some people were really arguing that this was a touchback. It looked like he kind of lost possession / changed hands as he crossed over the pylon and out of bounds. I just don't know in what world that should be punished with giving the ball to Michigan and taking a touchdown away from Ohio State. I think the officials made the right call, even if the rule possibly favored that being a touchback. I think the rule needs to be changed if that's the case, because that would have been an awful call. I don't think Ohio State loses the game if that changes, but it definitely impacts the final score and how the game felt. So I don't like that that was called into question. Maybe the touchback ruling needs to be changed up a little bit. That's probably another conversation for another day. But big touchdown there for Jeremiah Smith, making what was probably one of his biggest plays of the season in a huge game with a lot of smack talk leading up to this. I think that probably felt really good.
This outcome really didn't surprise me too much. I know I picked Michigan to win, but if Ohio State was going to win, I figured it would be this way. I mean, they were the better team coming into this game pretty clearly, and they just showed up and played exactly like that.
I don't think either of us really thought Michigan was the better team here. It was kind of like the Texas game where there's a trend, and to steer away from the trend kind of feels, I don't know, a little bit iffy. And this was just one of those games. Michigan, up to this point, had been doing the same thing. They'd been showing up with subpar teams, putting on subpar, inconsistent performances, only to end up beating a highly favorited, highly more talented Ohio State team in a huge rivalry. So we gave the rivalry its credit, we gave Michigan its credit, and they did not deliver. So Ohio State has a huge win to finish the season and relegate Michigan to mediocrity once again. Ohio State, the undefeated number one team in the country, staying at number one since week one. So I haven't had a team do that in a while.
Or no, what it was Texas, I think, and then they
Yeah,
beat
since they
Texas
beat
and took it.
Texas in week
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
So I guess technically you could say week two. Um, but Ohio
They were
State,
3 and Penn State was 2.
don't even.
Uh,
No, let's not even go there. Well, I guess we'll technically have to go there in a minute when we talk about some of our bad beats.
AP garbage.
But we were coerced by the AP poll into picking Penn State to be 10-2 or 11-1. That was not our fault. We will get to that later, but that'll wrap up Michigan Ohio State recap. My favorite game on the slate ended up going really interesting. Vanderbilt taking on Tennessee in Knoxville, winning this game 45-24 in a intense rivalry game. Once again, the man is the point of the conversation. Diego Pavia resurging into the Heisman odds and is most likely finding himself taking a trip to New York. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be taking a trip to the playoffs, which sucks. I think this team deserves a spot. There's just not enough of them, which may call for an expansion, but I think that that's probably something that the execs are already looking at. I don't think it has to do with this team necessarily for that being a reason, but if I was on the board and I looked at this Vanderbilt team, I think they've done enough to deserve being in. It's just a very crowded field. But Diego Pavia has a great game, going for 433 total yards and two touchdowns, having the big 24-yard touchdown run to ice the game. They absolutely dominated Tennessee in the second half. It was a tight game early, 21-21 at half. They rip off another three touchdowns in the second half to take a big lead on Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean Vandy was flat out the much better team here. It was tied at halftime, but that was mostly due to the 2 interceptions from Pavia. I mean, this one ended up being 45-24. Tennessee did not turn the ball over once, and Vandy with the 2 interceptions still able to win this one by 24. Vandy with 582 total yards, and then holding Tennessee to 83 rushing yards for the
Yeah,
game.
I think that stuck out to me a lot. Was 314 to 83 rushing yard advantage in favor of Vanderbilt. This football team's been doing this to people all season, but to exploit Tennessee in their home stadium, with their defensive weaknesses that they've shown all season as badly as they did in a rivalry game, this was one of the worst beatdowns I think Tennessee's ever taken from Vanderbilt. I mean, that's what it was. They got out physical by Vanderbilt at their stadium. That's not a good feeling. I'm shocked that there is not a lot more, I guess, unsettling in Knoxville around this game. Getting dominated by Vanderbilt in a rivalry matchup can't feel good. And I know that Josh Heupel was able to pull off an 8-4 season, which was about the expectation. I mean, most people were like, yeah, 8-7 wins is probably about right for this team. And that's where they ended up. They didn't beat Georgia. They didn't beat Bama. They didn't beat Vanderbilt. And they dropped the game to OU. I mean, outside of the Vanderbilt game, I think they were supposed to lose all those other ones preseason. So they really didn't exceed or fall below expectations, but I know the Vanderbilt game left a sour taste in this team's mouth heading into next season. This game in Nashville, with what's shaping up to be another good Vanderbilt football team, with the commitment of Jared Curtis today, the number one overall recruit in the country, I think this will be a really good game this time next year. Depending on who Tennessee brings in at quarterback, and Joey Aguilar maybe comes back, that should be a fun rematch.
Definitely be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know Clark Lee's gotten an extension with Vanderbilt. This team, I don't think is going anywhere. I think next year we're going to be talking about a new kind of Vanderbilt, a new brand. So it'll be really neat to watch how this team improves from year to year and see what they can do. But right now, I think all eyes are on Diego Pavia in the Heisman. I think that he should have a legitimate chance. If I was voting, I would probably vote for Diego Pavia. I don't think Fernando Mendoza deserves the Heisman. I think next up you'd probably have to give it to Julian Sayin, and his stats don't pop off the paper to me. His opponents don't pop off the paper to me. If anything, the Michigan game upped his odds in my eyes. I think the Michigan game was his best game. and he started off with an interception, and they didn't do much in the first quarter, only to rip off 3 touchdowns in the next 3 quarters. I thought that was his best game by far. I mean, you could point to the rest of the season and his numbers is very impressive, but you stack up all these quarterbacks' resumes next to each other and you take their logos and their names out of the equation, Diego Pavia is the Heisman winner. It's really not close. You could take Fernando Mendoza's touchdowns overall and maybe compare it to Diego Pavia and say, well, that's a key stat. Sure. You can also look at Julian Sain's completion percentage and his touchdown interception ratio and say, well, he's got this on his hands. That's a pretty good stat. Yeah, you could say that. But then you look at what Diego Pavia was able to do with the football team around him, what he means to his team, and the stats he was able to put up. I think he's clearly the MVP of the season. He may not have had that huge game like beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa or making the playoffs or winning the SEC championship, but I think he means more to his team as an individual player than anybody in the country. So I think that's his argument to win the Heisman. We'll see what the voters have to say about it, though. That's what matters at the end of the day. We don't know who they are, but they're going to be picking this award, so we'll just have to watch. Okay, we've got a couple more games we're going to break down really quickly. We have Georgia taking on Georgia Tech with a very gaudy final score of 16-9. I didn't see this one coming, especially with the performance of Georgia on offense. I figured if Georgia Tech played this way on offense, it would be a massive blowout. Gunnar Stockton only drops like 70 passing yards in this one.
I was so shocked. I mean, Georgia Tech's defense has been really trash for like the past month, so I expected Georgia to really feast on that. But I mean, they didn't. 3 field goals and a touchdown. Just really weird slog of a game. Very surprised. I thought it was going to be a shootout, if anything.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt like Georgia was going to win handily. They did, but if they did in the way that I thought, I figured they'd give up some points in the process. Like their defense has been spotty all year, so I figured even Georgia's defense would struggle in this one. But both defenses ended up being the best units on the field in this game. The offenses did not show up. Gunnar Stockton had his worst game of the year. Haynes King did not have a great game. It was just a hard-headed rivalry matchup. Georgia Tech comes out as the loser here, unfortunately, finishing their season with several losses to end their slate, missing out on the playoffs. I had this team sneaking into the ACC championship, winning it, and making the playoffs. They fall short of that, unfortunately, but they had a good season. I think you got to be happy if you're Brent Key, despite the fact how they finished. That's got to be frustrating, but they were able to be in the national spotlight for a while.
Yeah, just the Pittsburgh game. That's got them. I mean, just inexcusable performance
Yeah,
in that one,
the NC State
especially with
game
how Pitt
too.
performed against Notre Dame and Miami.
I think that fits Georgia Tech where they're supposed to be in the tier that we expected them to probably be in, which is in that tier 3 to tier 2 range. They're not a competitor at the end of the day with playoff teams. So I think if they had gotten in the playoffs, they probably would have gotten shelled.
I'd have to agree.
But yeah, low offensive output. Georgia comes out on top, takes on Alabama in the SEC championship game. Should be a fun one. Next game we have on the slate was Arizona State taking on Arizona. We both, I think, were on Arizona in this one, right? I know I had
Yes,
Arizona winning this
I had
one.
Arizona as well.
They dominated Jeff Sims in a kind of defensive struggle early in this one. Jeff Sims drops 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. I think he ripped off a touchdown run,
It
which
was
was their only
11
score of the
for
game.
25 for 114.
That is a classic Jeff Sims
Just
performance.
have a touchdown run.
So
7 yards.
that doesn't surprise me very much. Noah Fafita played a clean slate game, very solid performance. Arizona sneaky 9-3 team, and I think they moved up into the top 18 of the
They
college football
were, yeah, I
playoff.
believe they were number 18.
Yeah, I like the way this team played this season. They had the close loss against BYU, but the outlier loss against Iowa State that was a gross game. I actually bet on Arizona and had them as my dog in that game. They did not deliver. They could have been a fringe playoff team if they had been 10-2, depending on if they beat BYU. So
Yeah, I mean, they were beating them by 10 with like 5 minutes left in that game.
crazy how that shakes out that Arizona even would have had a chance to be in this conversation, but they were an overtime win at BYU from being in that conversation. So really interesting game here. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that Arizona would dominate Arizona State in the rivalry at the end of the season, I probably would have been pretty shocked. But knowing that Sam Levitt was not playing in this game, that Arizona was on a uprising, that would have made sense. But we were not expecting that to be the case. But here we are, both teams finishing out the season with 3+ losses. Neither will be competing for the Big 12. And then we've got Oklahoma versus LSU in what probably was the lowest scoring game on the entire slate up until OU decided to throw a wide open touchdown to close this one out to Isaiah Centegna. Uh, I have no words for how horrible OU played in this game. For them to come out with a win here at home against a absolutely dead in the water LSU team, they're lucky to still be in the playoff, to be honest with you. I'm shocked the playoff committee didn't bump them down after that. I didn't bump them down, to be fair. So I'm not judging the playoff committee for leaving them where they're at, but this was a bad performance. So I guess if this is their bad performance and they won, they shouldn't get pushed down.
It's really weird looking at a stat sheet here because, like, yardage wise, they actually didn't have a terrible game offensively. They had 393 yards, which against an LSU defense isn't bad, but the three interceptions from Mateer and only running the ball for 75 yards hurts for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of that came in the fourth quarter. They had a tunnel screen to Dion Burks, which was like 50 yards. And then they had like the 55-yarder to Isaiah Centegna late in the fourth to take the lead. And it looked like Oklahoma was going to be battling just to get a field goal. But they had a coverage bust on the Centegna touchdown late, take the lead. And then they had the tunnel screen just break wide open.
That's how they've scored this year, though, mostly on these huge plays. They
Yeah.
get a couple of them every game, it seems like.
Yeah, Centegno's been the entire offensive production at wide receiver. Dion Burks had been very quiet until this game with the tunnel screen touchdown, and that was all his speed. Good blocking setup, and he accelerates right through the gap and takes a touchdown there. LSU did virtually nothing on offense in this game, thriving off of three John Mateer interceptions. I mean, it was just LSU's defense keeping them alive here.
Yeah, I mean, they had sub 200 yards.
That's the story of their football season. If they had an offense, who knows what this team could do, which is crazy to say after just 2 years ago, they had one of the best offenses that has ever stepped foot on the field for LSU, and they went 9-3 because they had no defense. And now you get Brian Kelly building an elite defense and no offense. He gets fired. They hire Lane Kiffin. I don't know what they're expecting to get out of this. And maybe they're recruit at a higher level, but they've already been doing that. Maybe their offense is better. They've had great offenses. I don't know what they're expecting, to be honest with you, to be different. I feel like Brian Kelly probably was underachieving there, but at the same time, he was able to recruit, despite the fact that he's not from Louisiana, he doesn't have roots there. He was looking to win at a school that he felt like he had a better chance to win a national championship at. He thought that he could upgrade going from Notre Dame to LSU, and that is not the case. Notre Dame has been a better football team since he left.
Yeah, I mean, they've improved, in my opinion, under Marcus Freeman a good bit.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely make the case that Notre Dame is a better program because he left. And I don't even know that necessarily has to do as much with Brian Kelly not being a great coach as much as it has to do with Marcus Freeman being a better coach and better fit. And LSU has not been a better football team since Brian Kelly went there. You could say the same. Ole Miss is in the same situation as Notre Dame, except they hired from within as well. So I think that if you're Keith Carter, you looked at the Notre Dame situation and said, okay, well, I've got proven commodities around me. I want to retain players. Let's hire Pete Golding, and we can recover from this.
Just better hope it doesn't end up like Zach Arnett at State.
Yeah, we're gonna have to hope that's not the case. I'm leaning more on the side of Ole Miss is gonna have a rebuild year. Our schedule's tough. I think that player retention is gonna be tough. We're losing recruits by the day as we approach National Signing Day. I think it's going to be a tough one for Ole Miss. If we can't pull in a transfer portal class, we're going to get skull drugged by all these big teams on the road. But, I mean, you could do what Notre Dame did and come out with a decent recruiting class, retain some players, and turn things around. But Marcus Freeman's first season wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. They lost to Marshall. So we can't forget that.
What they go like 9-4 or something against a
It wasn't great.
schedule that was pretty easy.
It wasn't great. And then their national championship run where they almost had a chance to compete for a national championship, they lost NIU, and Ohio State ultimately beats them soundly in that game, but they still made it to the Natty. So that's a lot more than LSU's had to show since they hired Brian Kelly. We'll see if that changes under Lane Kiffin. He's a great coach. They have a bright future, I would assume, with him there. Okay, so we're going to get into our Optical Assault game of the week for week 14. And the twist is it's not a game this week. I looked through the game slate. I checked all the games and I looked at all the ugly box scores, and none of them were as ugly as the scene in Oxford when Lane Kiffin left the tarmac. I don't really have words to describe that exit. All I know is that the buildup was so unnecessary. This could have been like any other coaching hire, and Lane Kiffin could have cut the bull crap and the drama, gotten out of Oxford, gone ahead and signed with LSU, and we could have just all moved on with our weekend. But he had to have the stage and have all the lights on him, and that's what happened. And an innocent bystander in that was Marty Smith. Poor Marty, I think he had to have aged at least 20 years waiting on Lane Kiffin to come up with some legitimate material for him to report on. It was unreal. I've never seen somebody work so hard for media coverage in my life. So poor Marty Smith getting caught in the crossfire of Lane Kiffin's idiocy here. But this was tough for me to watch as an Ole Miss fan. That's partially why it's in this segment of the Optical Soul for this week. Um, I think that the real issue that needs to be discussed here is not the fact that Lane Kiffin left for Ole Miss's immediate rival in LSU to take a better coaching job and possibly take players and coaching staff with him during the middle of a playoff run. That's not great for the sport, but there's a reason why that's happening the way it is. I think that Lane Kiffin could have handled this a lot better if the schedule allowed it to be the case. And unfortunately, the NCAA is is the issue here. The calendar and the schedule right now is out of whack, and everyone knows it.
Yeah, I mean it's just inexcusable how much stuff is wrong with the sport right now. I mean with that, and then with the NIL rules and like being no restrictions on that, it's just a whole mess.
Yeah, I think that Ole Miss fans need to take a step back. Lane Kiffin did some really, really great things at Ole Miss. There's a lot to be thankful for there. I mean, he's done things there that no one's done, and they're not going to build a statue for him. If anything, there's going to be a lot more hate crimes committed against Lane Kiffin than anything memorial related happening in Oxford for Lane Kiffin. But there should be some gratefulness on the university's part and the athletic body and the students coming together and being able to recognize at the end of the day that he brought us a lot of great football in Oxford. I mean, we were like 37-3 at home in the past like 3 or 4 seasons. That's insane. It's never been done before in Ole Miss history. So it really the big issue is how this went down, and that's why Ole Miss fans are acting the way they're acting. They're blaming it on Lane Kiffin, and it's just not fair. He could have handled this situation a lot better, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the NCAA has to do something about this athletic calendar, lining up with academics, lining up with recruiting, lining up with the playoffs. Everything is decided to be jam packed into the months of December and January. That's not fair for the players. It's not fair for the coaches. That's not fair for the fans because it's ruining the integrity of the sport. Coaches can't stay committed to teams because they're trying to pursue what's best for them. Players then are the aftermath and the waterfall effect of that because they got to do what's best for them. And you're going to start seeing players opting out of playoff games because they're more worried about a check. That's what's wrong with the sport right now. Until we can get that figured out, this is going to be a problem down the stretch. I mean, we've already seen other coaches like John Sumrall and Eric Morris for the group of five representatives most likely leaving. Then you've got James Madison's head coach. So the three teams in the group of five that are supposed to be competing, all of their coaches are leaving. I don't know if they're even going to be coaching for the playoffs or whatnot. I think John Sumrall mentioned he might be coaching for at least the conference championship
I
game.
think all of them got permission to coach if they make the playoffs. Actually,
So that's great. I think that's awesome. But you know their mind's in a different place. It's in a different city, in a different part of the country. So it's just not fair to the fan bases or the players, or even the coaches and their families and the rest of the coaching staff. So I think that's the big issue. That's the optical assault on my eyes from the weekend. It's got to be fixed. We're going to talk about this a lot more maybe when we get into off season. I think this is a big issue that needs more lip service. I think that there's a lot of guys already talking about it, but there need to be some resolutions and some ideas how we can change this. I don't want to see this happen again next year. Even if they expand the playoff field and make it a little less complicated, you're still going to have situations like this come up almost every year. This just was a huge culmination of a lot of different places having to fire head coaches. So it might be 2 or 3 years before we see something like this again. But coaches are going to get fired. And typically, they're not going to get a new hire in until closer to National Signing Day, at the end of the season. So I think there needs to be some major changes. This was tough to watch. Lane Kiffin needs to be able to move on and coach his new football team, and Ole Miss fans need to move on and support Pete Golding and the coaching staff at Ole Miss. I'm tired of seeing the stuff like we saw with the Ole Miss fans reacting at the tarmac, cussing out the coaching staff leaving on the plane. That's just not a good look for the school. And I know you can't control that. The emotions are high. That's just how it is. But it's not a good look for our school and our student body. And it's not reflective of on how I think that we all really feel about what Lane Kiffin did at Ole Miss. I despise LSU, so this is not fun for me. I don't like watching somebody that I enjoyed watching coach our football team go to a team that I genuinely do not care for in the way that he did. If anybody should be mad, it's me. But I think that there's a legitimate um, argument to be made that it is so much more on the NCAA right now, and that's where our focus should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just the calendar being so cooked. And talking about them like fixing things, I mean, we saw the playoff field last year with the seeding being just absolutely whack, and they fixed that in a season. So
And
surely they could find some solution for the calendar in a season.
you
If
could
enough
argue that they
people
didn't.
complain about it. Well, they did with the auto conference champions getting the top four seeds and buys and stuff.
Yeah, that needed to
That
go.
was weird, and they fixed that in one season. So
Yeah, at least they got rid of that. I still don't like the way things are shaking out at the bottom of the playoff right now, but at least they were able to do that. So maybe there's some hope for next year for some of this to get fixed. But this was the Week 14 optical assault situation of the week. All right, we're going to do a one-time segment. This is our preseason revisit for our hits on record prediction and our atomic misses. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the SEC. I had Texas going 9-3, and Texas went 9-3 with the win against Texas A&M. I had them, I think, perfect all the way through. Losing to Ohio State, I expected that pretty obviously. And then losing to Florida, a lot of people probably didn't have that. I thought that Florida was going to win that game preseason. And then when the game actually rolled around, Florida ended up being trash. And I was not expecting them to win. And they won anyway. So my preseason expectation hit there. And then I figured they would lose to A&M I figured they would beat A&M to end the season. And they would drop we might have to cut this. I can't remember what their third loss was.
a little bit of it Ohio State, and then Florida, and
Who's their third
then
loss?
probably Georgia. Surely you
Oh
had
my
Georgia.
gosh. Yeah. Sorry. And then I had them losing to Georgia um, in Athens. I didn't see them winning that game just with the history um, of that game and how it's been lately. So I think I had them perfect down the stretch. And then I had LSU at 8-4. I'm giving myself a shout for this one. I know they went 7-5, but a lot of people had them going like 10-2 or 11-1. Some people had them going undefeated. So I think having LSU on the under for wins was a hit. Had Oklahoma at 10-2, hit on that. I didn't predict their schedule perfectly. I think I had them losing to South Carolina, expecting a lot more from them, as we'll see just in a second. But had them at 10-2, just missing out on the SEC championship. Had Vanderbilt at 6-6. This is where we get into the atomic misses. Apology letter filed for Vanderbilt, sending directly to Clark Lee and Diego Pavia. This was a bad miss. Had Florida going 9-3. They almost went 3-9. So not a good one. Had South Carolina at 9-3, and I think they ended up going 3-9, didn't they? Or
I
are they
think
four and
they were
eight?
4-8.
So not a great finish for South Carolina. Both those teams. I mean, if you had told me their quarterbacks stayed healthy for most of the season and they still underperformed this badly, I would have been shook. But yeah, you go back to August and tell me that, I wouldn't have believed you. So both those teams massively underperformed for me. And there were some people having them making the playoffs. I had them just coming up short in my preseason expectations, but I was still way off. So SEC was interesting, turned out really neat. The Big 12, I think, was the worst one for me. I barely had anything going for me in the hits category. I had Iowa State going 9-3. They went 8-4, and that was the closest I got. I had a couple other ones that were within one game, but that was the most notable one. They're the only consistent team in the Big 12. My atomic misses, I had Houston and Arizona going 5-7. I had BYU going 6-6 and Baylor going 9-3. So not too great. I was within one game on several teams, but nothing really notable there. Super volatile conference, like we talked about preseason, to be expected. Had in the ACC SMU going 8-4, and that ended up hitting, so that was a good one. Had FSU going 5-7, that one ended up hitting home. FSU finishing the season with a blowout loss against Florida. That was disgusting. And then, unfortunately, in the atomic misses category, we have Clemson. We're not going to talk about the fact that I had them going 11-1 like everybody else. I'm not a casual, I swear. Had Clemson going 11-1. I have North Carolina going 8-4. I don't know what kind of drugs I was taking when I made those picks. I think Bill Belichick might have had me at gunpoint. There's a chance. Had them going 8-4, not even close on that one. So the ACC, not too much going on there. The Big Ten is where I think I took home a lot of hits. I had USC going 9-3. I think that for the most part, I got most of those games right that they played in. I can't remember off the top of my head. Had Rutgers going 5-7. Maryland 4-8. I had them starting off 4-0, I'm pretty sure, and then dropping the next 8 games. I had to double check that. I'm pretty sure I did. I know I had Michigan right all the way through. I had them dropping all their big games against Oklahoma, USC, and Ohio State. Had Nebraska once again going 7-5. That one was fun. Seeing them finish out the season 7-5 was hilarious. Typical Nebraska fashion. And unfortunately, my two atomic misses were pretty atomic. I had Penn State going 11-1. And just like Clemson, I think this is one we can just kind of scrub off the whiteboard and forget about.
I mean, there's really nobody that had those teams being bad, to be fair.
You've got to give us some slack on that one. I promise we didn't let the media completely affect us on that. We did. So maybe next year
Well,
we'll learn a lesson.
we didn't bite on them being like actual national championship contenders like a lot of people did.
I think we had them all getting
We had
not
them
first
in the
rounded.
playoff and like being good teams, but we did not legitimately think they had national championship
We didn't have them
possibility.
going on runs.
No.
I think their schedules were still favorable, despite the fact that they underperformed. So, given what we were expecting them to possibly improve on, we expected 11 wins out of those teams, and that's not what happened. I also had UCLA going 8-4, on top of the expectation that Nico Emaliaba would have some supporting cast. They were able to have some fun this season, going 3-9 with a couple wins, beating Penn State, but the beginning and end of the season were not great. So very atomic miss on that one. I owe Indiana another massive apology. I had them going 8-4, but I saw the chances for Indiana to be a legitimate team this year. It was all going to hinge on Fernando Mendoza for me, and that panned out. So had them going 8-4. They finished 12-0. Atomic miss there. That wraps up my preseason revisits. I think that the Big Ten was my biggest takeaway. I think that conference is extremely predictable.
Yeah, it's so
I was
predictable.
barely a game off on most of the other teams. So
All right, so I'm gonna start off in the SEC, and I'm actually just gonna quickly tear through every single team in the Power Four here. So I had Georgia at 11-1, that came true. I had Texas at 11-1, they ended up going 9-3. Bama at 10-2 ended up being correct. I did have them going 6-2 in the SEC though, and winning the Florida State game, so that went a little bit differently than I expected. LSU at 9-3, missed on that one as they went 7-5. I also had South Carolina at 9-3. Most people thought they were going to be pretty good again. That did not pan out. Oklahoma at 9-3, pretty close there as they went 10-2. And then I had four teams at 8-4, and 3 out of 4 of these were pretty bad misses. A&M and Ole Miss, both I had them going 8-4. They both went 11-1. Florida at 8-4 actually was low compared to a lot of people in the preseason, but they were not even close to that, going 4-8. And then Tennessee, I had to go 8-4, and they actually went 8-4. Auburn at 7-5, they went 5-7, but easily could have been 7-5 with some of those games. Arkansas and Missouri both at 6-6. Missouri winds up at 8-4. Arkansas at 2-10, and then huge miss here. Vandy at 5-7. I was just not a believer that they were going to be able to build on last year. Huge, but they did. Mississippi State at 4-8. I only missed on one game. for their whole season. That was Arizona State, and then Kentucky had them going 3-9. They went what 5-7, wasn't it?
Yeah, with the blowout loss against Louisville, they got lost. I think they got beat 41
41
to
to nothing.
0. We
Yeah,
both had Kentucky in that game too, which sucks.
they
But
just had some inexplicable wins that made no
it was
sense.
disgusting. And I gotta give myself a little bit of credit on Mississippi State. The only game I was off on was the Missouri game.
We were both one game off on.
So I think that you got to give some cred. I mean, we were all over Mississippi State this season. Everybody had them going on the under on wins, like 2-10, 3-9. So I think we were pretty close on that.
Moving to the Big 12, I had some bad ones here. I had Baylor going 10-2. I thought they'd be riding some momentum from their strong finish last year. That was not the case at all. They were terrible. Texas Tech at 10-2 was pretty solid. So they went 11-1. I had Kansas State going 9-3. They've been pretty consistent in the Big 12, but they had a down year. I had Utah at 9-3. They went 10-2, so pretty solid there. Arizona State at 9-3. They wound up going 8-4. And then I had two teams going 8-4 here with TCU and Iowa State, and they both actually did go 8-4. So two hits there. I had Cincinnati at 6-6. They went 7-5. Houston at 6-6. They wound up going 9-3. Kansas at 6-6. They missed that by a game at 5-7. I was a little low on Arizona as I had them going 6-6, and they went 9-3. I had Colorado finding their way to a bowl game at 6-6. They went 3-9. And then a big miss here. I think you also had BYU at 6-6 as well. West Virginia, I had them going 6-6. They ended up going 4-8. I had UCF at 4-8. They went 5-7, and then Oklahoma State had them finishing last in the conference, but still I gave them way too much credit at 4-8 as they went 1-11.
Yeah, we probably both need to write BYU an apology letter as well. Unfortunately, that was a bad miss.
Yeah, that was really rough for us. And speaking of rough for me, as we move into the ACC, Clemson at 11-1, just like you had them at 11-1 also. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I mean, everybody had that to be fair. I had SMU at 9-3. If they had taken care of business against Cal last week, I would have been right there. I had Miami at 8-4, so a little bit low on them. Georgia Tech at 8-4, pretty close with that one as they went 9-3. Louisville at 9-3, they ended up going 8-4. I had Pitt at 8-4, that was correct. I had NC State at 8-4, they went 7-5. I had Virginia Tech at 7-5. They went 3-9. So pretty bad miss there. I figured they were gonna have a better year this year, but that was just not the case whatsoever. I had Syracuse at 6-6. They went 3-9 and were absolutely terrible down the stretch. So pretty bad miss there. I had North Carolina also having a decent year at 7-5, and that was just never going to be the case. I had Duke at 6-6, which wasn't terrible because they went 7-5, even though they're in the conference championship game somehow. I had Cal at 5-7. They went 7-5. I also hit on Florida State at 5-7. So we both did pretty good with that one. I had Virginia at 6-6. Nobody expected them to go 10-2. I mean, that came out of nowhere, so can't really fault me for that one. I had Boston College at 4-8. They went 2-10, I think, maybe 3-9. I had Wake at 3-9. They inexplicably went 8-4. No one saw that one coming. And then I had Stanford going winless, and they somehow ended up going 4-8 with how bad they looked in the early part of the year. And then moving on to the Big Ten, this is where I had my most success as well. I actually had Ohio State going 10-2 again. I had them losing to Texas and Michigan first game of the year and last game of the year, but they go 12-0. I did have Penn State going 11-1. Nobody saw their 6-6 season coming, so can't fault me for that one. I had Oregon at 10-2. They went 11-1. I think the only game I missed out on them for was Indiana. I had Michigan at 9-3, so hit on that one. I had Indiana at 9-3. They wound up going 12-0. I had Washington at 9-3. They went 8-4. I had USC at 8-4. They went 9-3. I was also a little too high on UCLA, or not a little too high. I was also way too high on UCLA. I had them at 7-5. They go 3-9. I actually perfectly predicted Illinois' season at 8-4, down to every last game. I had Iowa at 7-5. They went 8-4. Nebraska at 7-5. They went 7-5. Wisconsin at 6-6. A little too high on them. They went 4-8. Minnesota 7-5. They did go 7-5. Michigan State at 6-6. They wound up going 4-8. I had Rutgers at 5-7, and I actually perfectly predicted their season as well. I had Northwestern at 3-9. They somehow went 6-6, made a bowl game. I had Maryland at 3-9, 0-9. I predicted all their games correct except for their win against Wisconsin. And then Purdue down here at 2-10, 0-9. I predicted their season.
Yeah, I like that we're doing this segment. I don't think there's many podcasts out there that do it the way that we're doing it right now. This is the first time we've done this, so I'm not saying that we've been doing this for a while. This is the first time I've gone back and looked at full preseason predictions. It's really fun because I remember all these conversations that we had before the football season, all the different expectations and ideas and different ways we saw this season going. And now, after 12 weeks of football, sitting and looking back on those conversations, it's just crazy. All the memories created from the football season, being able to do this and have this conversation on the pod. I think it's a cool segment. I look forward to doing it next year. I, really would love to see if there's anybody else doing it. If there's a better way to do it. I want to see if there's maybe a software we can use to do individual game picks so we know and can see those. The way that we put them out on our socials, we just had the records and standings. I'd love to be able to find a way to compact it so you can see each game pick because we got a lot of seasons like for full teams correct. And I'd love to be able to kind of have that on record so it doesn't look like we just totally made that up. But there's really no way to condense that down to where it's postable material. So you kind of just got to take our word for it.
Did you pick all the games on Playoff Predictors, the website?
I think I
Because I did,
did.
but it's really hard to post that. That'd be a lot of posts.
I don't know if I can recover most of that. I did like halfway through
I've got them
some of them
all
on
actually
playoff predictors.
right here for every conference too. Because
That's
I
sweet.
quickly did the G5 conferences one day, so I actually have every game picked for the whole season.
That's pretty cool. We may have to do that next year. That's what we wanted to do initially, but we got so close to the season and it was just crunch time. Football was more important. It was being played in week 0 and week 1 than us making preseason predictions at that point. So we kind of put that on the back burner as we were starting a new podcast. So I think next year we'll have a lot more laid out of a plan on how we want to tackle that. But this was a fun segment for me. I'm glad we did this one. So looking forward to doing it again.
And next week, playoff predictions. We'll go back to our week 1 predictions
That's
for
going to
that.
be funny. So, unfortunately, we'll see the disgusting logos of the Penn State Nittany
Uh,
Lions and Clemson Tigers up on there. But we got some other ones that we did get right. So, excited about that. Looking forward to it. It is time to get into our conference championship predictions. This is one of my favorite times of the season. We get to see who is going to take home the title for their conference as the best team. And we're going to go ahead and start with the American Athletic Conference. North Texas takes on Tulane, and I think what's going to be a battle of offenses here. I like Drew Mestamaker and the Mean Green. I think that this is a far more superior offensive team. Jake Ritzlaff and Tulane have been kind of hot and cold this season. I don't know that I trust them to put on a legitimate offensive performance and be consistent. Drew Mestamaker has been lights out all year. Caleb Hawkins has been playing great at tailback. They've got weapons everywhere, and they score a ton of points. I just think that North Texas is going to outscore Tulane here. I'm taking North Texas with a final score of 41-35. I think Drew Mestamaker finishes out what is most likely going to be one of his last games wearing the mean green. I expect him to transfer after this.
I am actually going to take Tulane in this game. North Texas has been in the spotlight one game this year, and they got absolutely waxed in that game by South Florida. And also, Tulane's defense has been spotty at times this year, but at home, it has been really good. So I trust them to find enough on defense. And I think they hit enough big plays on offense. Retzlaff's going to have to be big on the ground with his legs here. But I think they find a way, 35-34, to win this game and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and you picked them to be your playoff group of 5 bid, so that would be a good hit for you
I
to
got to
pick,
ride
I
with
think.
them right here for that too.
Absolutely. If you went against them all the way down to the final stretch, I wouldn't see how that makes any sense. So rolling with Tulane there, I've got North Texas. Should be a shootout. I can't imagine it not being. Next, we've got the Mountain West Conference. Boise State takes on UNLV in another rematch, which we have several of. I've got Boise State winning this game 48 to 40. They won initially in the first matchup by a landslide, second half blowout. UNLV cannot stop the run. They've been playing better defense down the stretch. This was my group of five playoff pick in the preseason. They technically still have a route if they were able to get a good win here, but I just don't see the defense coming up big. Anthony Calandria is playing really well, but I'm just going to have to roll with Boise State on this one. I think they're going to run all over UNLV.
It was a 56 to 24 beatdown when these teams played at the same place here or this year. But I think UNLV actually is going to find a way to win this game. Boise State still without Max Madsen, and as you said, their defense has played better for the past month. So I think they actually found a way here to win this one 38 to 35, and Dan Mullen gets a conference championship in year one at UNLV.
Yeah, I know this makes me look bad. You just picked your group of five representative to win their conference championship, and I have mine sitting here with possibly a chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs. Nobody's talking about, but I really don't think they can get it done. So as much as I want to pick them, I already did the first time against Boise State as my dog. I'm not going to do it again. So I'm going to take Boise State. Next matchup, we've got Sun Belt Championship with James Madison taking on Troy. I think there's really not much to be said about this one. Goose Crowder and Troy are heavy underdogs in this matchup. I like James Madison 41 to 27 on an Alonzo Bennett masterclass.
Troy actually has a pretty salty defense, so I think they do enough to semi hang around in this one, but their offense has been so just mid. So I like James Madison to hold on here, 31 to 13, but Troy to cover, kind of an ugly game, but James Madison will find a way.
Yeah, James Madison puts up some serious points on inferior opponents. I likely would think that they score over 30 plus in this one easily. I don't know what Troy's going to be able to do on offense. Coming off of a decent win against Southern Miss, though, so maybe they have a little bit of wind behind their sails. Next, we've got the Mid American Conference, Miami, Ohio versus Western Michigan. I think these teams have already played once this season, so we've got another rematch here.
Miami hosted it and beat them 26 to 17.
Yeah, I'm rolling with Miami, Ohio again in this one. I think the offense is what it's going to come down to, and Western Michigan's got a really solid quarterback, but I like Miami, Ohio, and Daquan Finn probably to be the better offense again in this matchup. The first matchup, despite it being a 9 point victory in favor of Miami, Ohio, I think it was pretty close most of the game. A lot of late field goals from Miami, Ohio to get them the victory there, but both teams had a solid game. They were very even on the field as far as the box score was showing.
I'm actually pretty sure Daquan Finn left the team.
He's not on the team anymore.
I'm pretty sure he left the team.
Well, there goes my ball knowledge. That definitely
I'll check on that for us though.
That would impact my decision a little bit because Western Michigan has a really solid quarterback. I think he's run for over 1,000 yards this season already. So if they have the quarterback edge, I probably would lean them in this matchup. I figured that Daquan Finn was still with Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, they're playing another dude, but he's actually played well.
Well, regardless, Miami, Ohio has played good football. I'll stick with my pick. I had them winning 28 to 20. But they're going to need a solid defensive outing to slow down Western Michigan in that offense.
I'm going to take Western Michigan here. I know they did lose the matchup in season, but with Daquan Finn being out makes things a little bit different. And I'm pretty sure this game last year was between two teams that had already played, and one team had won. And I think the team that ended up winning the conference championship lost it in the regular season to the same team. So I think the same thing happens here. I like the Broncos to win this one 24 to 22.
Yeah, that should be an interesting game. I know there's a lot of conference championships on the slate, but I bet that one will be at a weird time on like a Thursday or something, and we can tune in for it. I'm not sure on when the scheduling is for that, but I'd like to be able to watch some of the Group of Five conference championship games this year. Next, we've got the Conference USA. We have Kennesaw State taking on Jacksonville State in another rematch. So I'm pretty sure Jacksonville State won the first matchup on top of Cam Cook having a really solid performance and Jacksonville State's quarterback going for over 100 rushing and over 100 passing. I expect them to do the same here. I think that offensively, Kennesaw State's going to have a hard time stopping Jacksonville here. Kennesaw State's been playing really good, though. It just depends on what they get out of the quarterback position. But I'm going to take Jacksonville State to win 38 to 25.
These two teams played several weeks ago, and I believe it was a 35 to 26 win for Jacksonville State. and that was at Jacksonville State. This one's also at Jacksonville State, but I think Kennesaw actually is going to find a way here and in their second FBS year, win a conference championship. Kennesaw is a team that loves to get off the fast starts, pounce on you early. They weren't able to do that against Jacksonville State the first time around, but I think they are here. I think they built up a solid enough lead to be able to hold on and win this game 30-28.
Yeah, I think we've been going opposite directions on most of these group of five games because a lot of these are rematches. I think that we both kind of have a different feel on these rematches, so that's something to definitely take a note of as we get into more of them. But I think that's going to wrap up our group of five conference championship predictions. Moving on to our Power Four conference championships, we're going to start with the SEC. We have another rematch. Alabama takes on Georgia in Atlanta. I have Alabama taking another win here, 34-28. I think that the Alabama problem is going to stay consistent here for Kirby Smart, at least for the SEC championship game. I think we may see these teams again in the playoffs, regardless of who wins.
Very possible.
So I will take Alabama here with a slight lean. I think that Alabama's got to be able to find a way to run the ball if they want to win this game. And they've been finding something with a couple of different backs in the backfield right now. I think they got to string together a legitimate rushing performance here. If they can't do that, I'm probably going to take Georgia again in the next matchup if they're able to see each other on the field again, and therefore ending Alabama's run in the postseason. But it really just comes down to that. If Alabama can run the ball in this game, they've already proven they can beat Georgia. I think they'd be able to do it again.
Alabama's just owned Georgia recently, besides that one national championship game. I think that's going to continue in this one. I like the Tide to win this one 24-20. I think this will be a really weird game. Probably a game you look at the box score, or if you looked at only the box score, you would say that Georgia won the game. But I think Alabama's going to find a way somehow.
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to be watching in this game is what the scoring looks like. I feel like usually when you see these rematches of good teams with good coaching staffs, when they play again, at least the offensive coaches find a way to score a little bit more points. So they're going to score what they probably scored last time, most likely, unless the defensive coaching staffs just see something glaringly obvious that they feel like they can exploit. A lot of times, offensive coaching staffs just have more success in these rematches. So that's why I have it being a little higher scoring. I want to see if that holds true for some of these other rematches, but specifically for this one with the coaching staffs, I feel like that plays a big role. Passing game for Alabama's been weak lately. I'm looking for it to take a step back up here. Moving on, we have the Big 12 championship game. Texas Tech takes on BYU in another rematch. We've got probably what looks like it could be a blowout, but some people are leaning this being closer. I'm going to take Texas Tech, and I wouldn't call this a blowout, but a comfortable win. Having them winning 37-19. I think that BYU is going to try to keep in this game and going into the second and third quarters, just barely hanging on by a thread. I think Texas Tech probably is going to kneel this one out comfortably, though. I think that if you look at the lines of scrimmage, Texas Tech is the better football team. So I don't feel like BYU has a legitimate chance here. Bear Bachmeier's going to have the game of a lifetime to win this one.
I'd have to agree. I have the Red Raiders winning this one 31-20. I just think they have too much. They can just overwhelm BYU, and I think BYU is a really good football team. I actually think they deserve to be in the playoffs, but I think Texas Tech is just another caliber of team, and I think they control this one start to finish and win it by a lot.
Yeah, I think BYU deserves all the credit they're getting for where they're at. Unfortunately, Texas Tech is just that one giant stone in their path, and they have to go through it twice. So BYU, even if they lose this game close, it's looking like they're probably not making the playoffs. So that sucks that one team had to keep you out of the playoffs, but at the end of the day, if you can't beat Texas Tech on a neutral site, you're probably not making it into the playoffs. So this team probably deserving of a spot, but I didn't see them making a run anyway. All right, we've got the Big Ten championship game. Battle of undefeateds. We have Ohio State taking on Indiana in a huge matchup. Shocked College Game Day is not at this one.
Yeah, that kind of shocked me for sure too.
I think that the SEC bias took a real hit in the arguments on all the social media platforms with this announcement. You can't really get around it.
It's a 1 versus 2 conference championship. It makes no
I
sense.
don't know how you skip this one, especially considering the fact that Alabama and Georgia have had multiple appearances of College Game Day this season.
Seems like it's always that SEC championship though. Anyways,
It typically is, but there's already enough going on around the SEC championship with different media venues. you got to pick this one. I'm shocked they didn't. I don't know what the criteria was for that decision, but it probably has a lot to do with viewership. But regardless, Ohio State and Indiana will be playing, and I think Ohio State's going to probably handle this one in the fourth quarter. Take care of business. I have them winning 35-17. There is absolutely a scenario where this game is closer, where Indiana just outright is the better football team and wins that day. I think talent wise, they are not the better football team, but they may be one of the only teams that can compete with Ohio State in the fourth quarter. So in this scenario, I do have them coming up short late in the game, but it would not shock me at all if Indiana makes this close. I think Indiana's run game is what gives them the best chance. Ohio State's defense is just so good. I think that Indiana hasn't played anybody near this good, and it's not even close all season. Very weak schedule from Indiana. Oregon's the only comparable team, and I think I would probably pick Ohio State by around the same score against Oregon right now. So I like Julian saying to pick apart Indiana and find some points early. The receivers, Cardinal Tate, Jeremiah Smith, and Brandon Ennis, are going to be really tough to stop. But if you look at Fernando Mendoza and Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt, they've got some serious weapons there. Roman Hemby has been really solid at running back. They could get rolling, and it could be a shootout. Who knows? But I like Ohio State's defense and offense in both matchups here.
Yeah, I'm going to take Ohio State too, but I do think Indiana is a really good, legit team. They only had a few opportunities this season against other good teams to prove that, but I feel like they went above and beyond in those matchups to show that. And then against weaker competition, they murdered everybody. I think this is going to be a four-quarter competitive game, as I do really think Indiana's a really good team. But I like Ohio State to come on top in this one, 31-24.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. Anytime you have two 12-0 teams playing each other, it's going to be entertaining. And I know I had the score being a decent margin, but I think that even going into the fourth quarter, regardless of if Ohio State breaks away or not, it'll be competitive. Indiana's going to lay out everything they got on the field. It's not a do or die situation for either team, but having that number one seed would be huge. So the winner of this game will undoubtedly be the number one team in the country going into the playoffs. Next, we've got the ACC championship game, another rematch. Virginia takes on Duke after previously swamping them this season, 34-17. I don't think the score in the regular season was indicative of how bad that win was against Duke. Duke really did not have a chance in this game ever. They were down at one point by multiple touchdowns and were able to close the gap late. I think Virginia's the better football team. I have a hard time seeing Duke winning this game unless Mensa throws for like 400 yards, but they just have not been consistent on offense. If they don't turn over the ball and Mensa has another incredible 400 plus yard game, Cooper Barkate finds a couple wide open passing plays, maybe Duke can stay in it. I'm going to take Chandler Morris and the Cavaliers to win 37-21.
So ACC, like the leading team in the ACC, at least by media perception, has fallen off every chance this year. I mean, starting off with Clemson, obviously they fell off a cliff. Florida State after beating Alabama fell off a cliff. Louisville fell off after leading the way after beating Miami, which is another team that fell off. Pitt was in the running until last week, and they lost and got eliminated. Georgia Tech had a red carpet in front of them. To a conference championship appearance, they lost. I mean, the list just goes on and on. SMU last week, they just had to beat Cal. They couldn't do it. Virginia has made it here, but I think they also screw their chance here to a very mid Duke team. I just think the way this conference has been so chaotic this year, I think it carries into the conference championship game, and I like the Blue Devils 30-27. Mensa finds enough, and they win.
They're going to need it to be a shootout because Chandler Morris is the least of their problems. Virginia's defense stifled them the last time they played. I think that that coaching staff's going to have a hard time finding a lot of points. It should be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a massive blowout like the first time they played this season. I do have Virginia pulling away probably in the second half, but hopefully we get a good game out of it. I'd love to see some chaos. If anything, I don't think that either of these teams deserve to be in the playoffs. So it would be great if neither of them made it and Ole Miss didn't have to play either of them. So
Either one's getting waxed.
I agree. I think either of these teams would get smoked.
And Duke probably has like 1% chance to make it if they win. Anyways.
Yeah, if James Madison takes care of business, they'd love to see Duke get a win here. All right, I think that's going to do it for episode 20 of the Feel for the Game podcast. this was a special one, getting the 20 episodes recorded and published. I'm really excited about it. We've made it through an entire regular season of college football from preseason predictions all the way getting into conference championship week. We are excited for the final slate of college football, getting into the best part of the season after rivalry week, which is my personal favorite. We've got a lot of good football ahead of us, and we're just now getting to the biggest games. So excited to start previewing some of those and maybe even going to some. We'll talk about what those destinations look like as they start getting announced. But we're not going to be attending a conference championship game. Ticket prices are pretty hefty, and I think we just want to try to take in watching all these games and getting prepared for the playoffs. So, looking to find a good location once they announce the final bracket to attend a playoff game. But that's going to do it for us today. Episode 20 of the Feel Free Game Podcast.